I noticed it first in the silence. Not the kind of silence that fills a house when everyone's asleep, or when the fridge hums louder than usual. No, this was the kind of silence that lingers in the spaces you used to belong to, after you've been erased from them. I stood at the doorstep of the house I'd helped renovate with the payout from my first job, the house with the chipped teal mailbox I'd repainted one Sunday, while everyone else watched a game I wasn't invited to. My duffel bag was heavier than it should have been after a single overnight at the oncology wing. I'd only packed pajamas, a charger, and the pale scarf that used to belong to Mom. But the key I always kept clipped inside the lining of that bag no longer worked. At first, I thought it was chemo brain. Maybe I grabbed the wrong key. Maybe my hand was just shaking too much. Maybe this wasn't even my door. But the small heart-shaped wind chime I'd made at a roadside pottery class still hung from the gutter. My potted lavender was gone, though, replaced by a fake plant in a white plastic container, cold, clean, like a rental staging. I tried again. Still didn't turn. Then I texted Elise. Hey, door's not opening. You home? No typing bubbles. Just the timestamp. Read 4:47 p.m. No reply. My sister Elise had once held my hand at our mother's funeral when I couldn't breathe. She used to braid my hair before school because I never learned how. She told me, years ago, that if anything ever happened to me, she'd be there. But grief is a shapeshifter, and chemo doesn't just peel back your hair. It peels back people too. When I finally got her on the phone, hours later, her voice was tight and pre-rehearsed. Look, it's not that we don't care, but you've been a lot lately. Everyone's overwhelmed. Overwhelmed? I repeated, sitting on the front step, legs numb, holding a grocery bag full of snacks I bought for them. It's just the energy, the hospitals, the moods. It's dark. It's hard on Emma. Emma. Her daughter. My niece. The only reason I hadn't moved out of state years ago. So what, you changed the locks? It's not personal. It's just temporary. We need space. You can stay at a friend's for now, right? I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't ask if the hospital visits and nausea were easier for me. I just let the silence answer for me. She sighed, like she was the one in pain. Please don't make this harder than it is. You're so sensitive lately. The next 3 nights I slept in my car. A nurse named Doreen gave me a warm blanket from the chemo ward and a small box of crackers she'd hidden in her drawer. I didn't tell anyone else. I didn't post about it. I didn't beg for pity or ask for a place to crash. I just started walking after each infusion, going farther down the side roads than usual. Past old bookstores, past junkyards and half-built strip malls. I remembered every road like it still belonged to me. And that's when I remembered something else. The deed. My name was still on it. Let me know when you're ready for part 2, where she revisits the paperwork, remembers what she paid for, and begins planting the seeds of quiet return, not out of vengeance, but to reclaim what was never truly given to her. Would you like me to continue with the next part? There are some betrayals that don't bleed. They don't scream or slam doors. They just sit there, like a cup left on the counter, growing mold. The morning after my 3rd night in the car, I went to the city records office. It was a quiet building, the kind that smelled like old toner and ceiling leaks. I hadn't been there in years, not since I helped Elise and Mark sign the mortgage refinancing when the pandemic hit their bakery hard. I remember because I'd just gotten my work bonus, a quiet transfer of money from my account to theirs. I thought, that's what family did. shared what they had. I hadn't told anyone that I'd put my name on the title in exchange for covering the closing costs. Mark said it was just a formality. Elise called it a technicality. But the woman at the window, her name tag said Regina, printed the document in less than 3 minutes. And there it was, in dull courier font, name of title holders, Elise Margaret Fontaine, Ava Celeste Fontaine Ava. Me. It felt strange, holding proof that you exist, when everyone around you pretends you don't. That night I checked into a motel on the edge of town. It smelled like cigarette ash and lemon-scented bleach, but the door locked from the inside, and no one rolled their eyes when I coughed. I unpacked the deed onto the faded nightstand and stared at it for a while. There was something satisfying about the paper's texture. Real, not sentimental, not dismissible. Elise texted me the next morning. Emma's asking where you are. I told her you needed rest. Don't make this messy, Ava. That word again. Messy. Like I was a spilled drink. Like my grief was a broken pipe under the sink. Like being sick made me untidy, inconvenient, embarrassing. I never replied. Instead, I went to the bank, then the post office, then a coffee shop, with one working outlet and a half-frozen croissant. The paperwork wasn't hard. All I had to do was notify the county of a pending lien, a minor action. Symbolic, really. Something Elise and Mark wouldn't even notice until they tried to apply for a loan or refinance again. I didn't tell them. I didn't warn them. Let them keep thinking I was resting. I spent my afternoons walking past the house I once called home. I never got too close. Just enough to see Emma's pink bike still chained to the fence, the new fake lavender plant by the door, the light in the kitchen that was once my reading nook. Once I saw Elise through the window. She was laughing at something on her phone, wearing the robe I got her last Christmas, the one with the stitched initials. She never saw me. Or maybe she did. And just like everything else, she chose not to. But I remembered everything. The utility account still under my name. The taxes I quietly covered last spring when Mark forgot. The letter Mom left me, hidden inside the false bottom of her old jewelry box. A letter Elise never knew existed. It took me 3 days to go back for it. Mom's jewelry box had been tucked in the corner of my storage unit, inside the last cardboard box I packed when I thought I'd only be gone for a week. That was before Elise changed the locks, before Mark stopped saying my name, before I realized silence could feel like violence. The jewelry box was smaller than I remembered. Navy, velvet, worn down at the corners. She used to keep it under her bed, back when she still wore perfume and called us her girls, in that way that made it feel like we were part of something unshakable. After she passed, Elise claimed most of the jewelry. I didn't mind. I never wore much anyway. I kept the box. Not for what was in it, but because I remembered her hands on it. Fingers curled over the latch like she was holding a secret. And she was. The bottom panel came loose if you knew where to press. A little left of center, just above the red thread. Snag. That's where she'd taped it. A folded piece of paper, yellowed from time. My name in her handwriting. Ava. If Elise finds this, she'll say I was being unfair. But you were the one who sat with me, who cleaned me, who brought tea without being asked. If there's anything left, anything that matters, it's yours. You don't take up space. You made space for the rest of us to breathe, and I see that. I love you. Forgive me for not saying it more while I had the time. Mom, I read it twice. Then once more, out loud, in the dim light of the storage unit hallway, while a moth circled the bulb above me. I hadn't realized how much I needed to be told that I didn't take up too much space, that I wasn't a burden, that I was seen. Because somewhere along the way, Elise's words had rewritten me, had reduced me. You're sensitive. You're hard to be around. It's just too much. Don't make this messy. The next morning, I called the estate attorney Mom had used, a woman named Janet. She still remembered me. Asked how I was holding up. I didn't tell her I was sleeping in a motel or using a laundromat sink to rinse out my sweaters. I didn't tell her the smell of bleach reminded me of the hospital now. I just asked what needed to be done to reopen the estate files. She paused. Is there a dispute? I told her no. But there would be. That same afternoon, I drove past the house again. Elise had put up string lights on the porch, like it was a cottage in a magazine. The lights glowed soft against the early dusk. I wondered if Emma helped her hang them, or if she even asked. My scarf, Mom's scarf, was hanging on the back of the porch chair, the one she used to wear when she walked me to kindergarten. The one I packed for chemo because it made me feel safe. They hadn't even noticed I left it behind, or maybe they did. And just like everything else, they chose not to. I didn't knock. I didn't scream. I didn't text Elise a photo of the letter or the deed. I just walked back to the car and turned the heat up. I had another appointment tomorrow, and I was starting to feel strong again. Not in my body. Not yet. But in the way I stopped flinching when I said no. In the way I didn't apologize for existing. Sometimes healing doesn't feel like progress. Sometimes it feels like paperwork. I sat in the bank lobby with a clipboard balanced on my lap. The heating vents made the room too warm, but I didn't ask anyone to turn it down. I was learning how not to shrink myself to fit a room. One of the forms required proof of identity and home ownership. I slid the deed across the counter, along with my ID. The woman behind the glass looked bored at first, until she noticed my name. Oh, so you're the co-owner. She smiled politely, tapping at her keyboard. Looking to make changes? I nodded. Yes, I'd like to separate the utility accounts. No more shared bills. No more automatic deductions from the account I'd set up 5 years ago when Elise was pregnant with Emma, and money was tight. I used to call it my emergency buffer for family. Turns out, I was the emergency. By the time I left the bank, I'd frozen the joint account, opened a new one under my name, rerouted the tax statements to a P.O. box, no drama. No warning. Just a soft unraveling of ties I'd once knotted too tightly. That night at the motel, I ordered a burger and took a long, scalding shower. My scalp still felt like borrowed skin, but I no longer cried when I saw my reflection. The girl in the mirror didn't need soft lighting. She needed space, and she was finally claiming it. Elise texted me the next morning. Hey, not to be rude, but we got a weird notice from the city about property tax stuff. Can you check? Also, Emma wants to FaceTime you. I stared at the screen. She always used Emma as a buffer, a reason for me to ignore what had happened, a tool to pull me back in, as if love from a child could whitewash betrayal from a parent. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I drove to the park near the old library. The air smelled like wet bark and cold metal. I sat on a bench and watched a mother braid her daughter's hair while she told her a story. The girl was laughing. I closed my eyes. For a moment, I let myself miss them. Emma's little voice, Elise's fake apologies, Mark's tired indifference. Then I opened the letter again. Mom's letter. You don't take up space. You made space for the rest of us to breathe. When I got back to the motel, I drafted an email. To Janet, the estate lawyer. To the county. To the utility companies. I wasn't being messy. I wasn't being emotional. I was being clear. And I was almost done. The notary's office was quiet, the kind of place that smelled like faded carpet and sealed envelopes. I sat across from a man named Victor. He didn't ask why I was there. He didn't look at the scarf on my head or the dark moons under my eyes. He just asked me to initial, sign, and breathe. This gives you authorization to freeze any refinance requests without your written consent, he said. I nodded. My hand trembled slightly. He offered me a heavier pen. The form slid into the orange envelope like a secret, like closure dressed in legal language. I'd never raised my voice to Elise. Not once. Not when she took the master bedroom after Mark moved in. Not when she used my college refund check to buy a new fridge. Not when she said, "We're all tired, Ava," as if that explained the locks. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't even anger anymore. It was a receipt. Later, I sat in my car outside the county clerk's office, watching a leaf tremble in the wind on my windshield. I thought about mailing the letter to Elise, the one Mom wrote, just sending it. No message, no return address. I didn't. Some things don't need to be handed back. Some things, when broken, stay in your chest like bone splinters. You learn to move around them. Instead, I went to the small P.O. box I'd rented. Inside were 3 envelopes. One from the city tax office. One from the bank. And one from a lawyer I didn't recognize, sent on behalf of Elise and Mark. I opened it slowly. Sitting on the cold concrete ledge outside, it was a formal letter, blunt, short, no apology. We are requesting clarification regarding recent financial obstructions relating to shared property accounts. They were confused. They thought I'd disappear. They thought I'd let it go. They thought I was still that girl, the one who folded blankets and swallowed words like pills. I folded the letter, placed it back in the envelope, and held it for a moment. Then I laughed. Just once. Quietly. Not because it was funny, but because it was so small. After everything, this was their panic? A blocked refinance? I used to dream about screaming at them, letting all the years of quiet build into something seismic. But this was better. They would never understand how loud silence could be. I texted Emma. Just Emma. Hi. I love you. I'll always love you. But I can't come back right now. Maybe one day. No explanation. No promises. Just the truth, shaped softly for a child. She sent back a heart emoji and a voice note of her saying, "Miss you." I listened to it once, then archived the thread. At the motel, I packed my bag. The final chemo session was in 3 days. My numbers were holding steady. The doctor said I was lucky, the kind of luck that looks like survival, not miracles. I didn't feel lucky, but I felt done. The chemo chair felt colder than usual. Maybe it was just me. Maybe it was the way the nurse's voice lowered slightly when she said, "Last round, Ava. You made it." I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just nodded and held the paper cup of ice chips in my hands until they melted. On the little table beside me was the only thing I'd brought with me from the motel, the velvet jewelry box. Not for the jewelry, not even for Mom's letter anymore, but because it reminded me I had once been part of a home and still carried pieces of it, even after the locks changed. The nurse, Doreen, came by to unhook the IV near the end. She always smelled like lavender and wore little sunflower pins on her scrubs. "You've got that quiet strength," she said, gently wrapping the tape from my arm. "People like you don't always get the applause, but you always find the way through." I blinked fast, thanked her. I didn't know how to say that her kindness had kept me whole some days, when even my bones felt like betrayal. After chemo, I didn't go back to the motel. I went to see the apartment. It was small, just a one-bedroom over a Vietnamese bakery, where the air always smelled like pandan and rice flour. The walls were cream-colored. There was a chipped tile in the kitchen and a heater that made a ticking sound. The window looked out over a row of rusted fire escapes, but in the afternoon light, it looked golden. The landlord was a woman in her 60s named Lynn. She didn't ask personal questions. Just handed me the keys and said, "If you like quiet, this is a good place. Quiet people deserve somewhere to be." I stood in the middle of the empty living room with nothing but my bag and a folder of documents. No furniture, no photos, no dishes, but it felt wide. Like the first breath after a long, heavy silence. That night, I sat on the floor with a carton of noodles and a cheap lantern from the dollar store. I opened Mom's letter again, not because I needed reassurance, but because it felt like she deserved to see this moment. She would have liked the bakery downstairs. She had a soft spot for sweet rice and bitter coffee. I imagined her voice, not saying, "I'm proud of you," but something smaller. "You made space." The next morning, I bought a second-hand futon and a kettle. I hung up a scarf, not Mom's, but one of my own. Burnt orange with tiny stitched suns, a color I never wore before. I used to be afraid of being too bright. Now I wanted to take up space, even if it was just on a blank wall. I didn't recognize the number at first. It rang once, then again, and when it stopped, a voicemail blinked on the screen like a memory I didn't ask to keep. It had been 11 days since the last chemo session, 7 since I moved into the apartment, 3 since I woke up without nausea for the first time in months. I was learning how to live in the absence of apology. I let the voicemail sit there until morning. It felt like something fragile. A bone you're not sure is healed enough to press on. But I played it anyway, sitting cross-legged on my new futon, legs wrapped in a thrifted quilt. Elise's voice came through the speaker. Slurred, maybe tired, or just pretending to be. She always sounded sad when she wanted to sound innocent. "Ava, it's Elise. I don't know where you are right now. I mean, I know you've been avoiding us, but Emma's been asking? She keeps asking." A long pause. I could hear her breathing. "You didn't have to, go and change everything, you know? Mark said we should have had a clearer conversation, but things got overwhelming. We just needed space." Another pause. This one felt practiced. "You could have just come to us. You didn't need to do all this legal stuff. It's complicated now. You're making it complicated." Then quieter. "But I guess that's what you do. You always make things harder than they need to be." The message cut off before it finished. I didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I'd already mourned this version of her. The one who rewrote her guilt into my burden. The one who turned neglect into defense. The one who saw boundaries as betrayal. I didn't call back. Instead, I folded laundry, hung the kettle, swept the corners of the floor I now owned. In the afternoon, I walked to the corner store and bought a small corkboard for the wall. I pinned Mom's letter in the center, and beside it, I pinned something else. A photo of me and Emma, taken 2 summers ago. She was holding a sparkler, her eyes wide, my hand on her shoulder. We were both laughing. I kept it not because of Elise, but because some connections deserve to be remembered without being repeated. That evening, another voicemail came in. No words this time, just ambient noise, and somewhere in the background, Emma's voice, Miss Auntie Ava. Tell her I still have the shell she gave me. It hit harder than I expected. I almost called. Almost. But instead, I pulled out a small padded envelope. I placed the photo inside, along with a pressed lavender stem from Mom's old box and a folded note that simply read, "Love doesn't vanish, but sometimes it needs distance to breathe." I addressed it to Emma. No return name. The letter came folded in thirds, crisp and clinical. It arrived on a Tuesday, tucked between a grocery flyer and a coupon for half-off dry cleaning. I almost missed it. But the envelope had the estate lawyer's logo in the corner. The one Mom had trusted with her will. The woman with the soft voice and steady hands. I sat at the small kitchen table, sunlight pushing in through the fogged window, and opened it with slow fingers. This letter confirms your full withdrawal from the shared property agreement for 42 Halston Avenue. The remaining party has been notified. Your name has been officially removed from the tax and ownership records as per your request and provision of legal ownership documents. We have filed the affidavit with the county. No further action is required. I stared at the words for a long time. They were quiet words, but they thundered. I had done it. Not to prove anything. Not to punish. Just to stop bleeding into places that never held me. A week later, another letter came. This one from Elise, handwritten, 2 pages. I didn't read it. I slid it, unopened, into the bottom drawer next to old hospital bracelets and expired tea bags. Some things belong to the past, even if they come with a stamp. That night, I turned off my phone, lit a candle, sat by the window with a book I'd read 3 times, but never understood until now. Outside, the city hummed, muffled sirens, footsteps. The bakery below closing up for the night. The window fogged a little from the tea. I drew a circle in the condensation, then wiped it away with my sleeve. Just to see clearly again. I thought about Emma. Maybe one day, when she's old enough, I'll tell her the whole story. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll just keep showing her what peace looks like. By living it. In the end, it wasn't a dramatic ending. No confrontation. No apology shouted into the rain. No last-minute phone call. Just the soft closing of a door that used to be mine. And the quiet opening of one that finally is. I didn't get everything I gave, but I kept the one thing. They couldn't take myself.